Welcome to UFHL Now! A close-up look at the ultimate fantasy hockey league. The most realistic fantasy gameplay. High stakes. High reward. Here's your host, the owner of Duckman's domination in the UFHL, and the mighty Mallards of the UFAHL, Dean Millard.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 23 of UFHL Now, coming to you from the Marsh, just outside of Edmonton, the home base quarters of Duckman's domination, the mighty Mallards, and high-level scouting run by my better half, Trish Millard. This show is proudly broadcast on the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. We are your one-stop fantasy sports shop, and if you are interested in fantasy sports, check out our shows. We'll give you a link a little bit later. And also, if you have a fantasy sports show, you should be on our network. Check us out on Twitter at UFS Network. You can email UFSN at UFFsports.com. And if you'd like to reach Duckman's Domination on Twitter, it's at Ducks Domination. So, what we have for you today is our UFHL insider, Larry Fisher, will be by very shortly. We're going to talk about trades, and more trades. Some big blue liners were dealt in the last little while in the UFHL. And some other players that are on the block right now. There are some teams that are still trying to make moves, and they need to make moves because they need to get cap compliant, and other teams are just making minor moves. So we'll talk about some teams that are possibly having players on the block. There was one humorous deal that we will bring you as well. Thanks to Mooch of Red Army for pulling off that one. Big week for scouts. So many great players were added. Some good dollars were spent as well. So we'll dive into some of those numbers. And the upcoming owners meetings are coming up. And Larry and I aren't really going to touch on this, but I'm going to touch on this right now. You need to get things in order if you want to make a presentation or a possible rule change at the owners' meetings. So I want to tell you something. Come a little bit closer. I want to tell you this. Here's what I'm going to suggest. Here's a sneak peek into one of the things Duckman's Domination will be putting up for discussion. There is one rule change that we will be submitting. I'll save that for you. I'm sure you all could figure out what that might be. But the rest of the things I have put forth is just to get discussion going. One of the things I want to discuss is specific positions. So if your guy plays right wing, he plays right wing. You have to slot him in. You have to have specific positions. I'm the head of baseball. We will have specific positions in baseball like they do, but going a step further with left field, right field, and center field. I want to get the conversation going about having specific left D, right D, left wing, right wing, center positions on our teams. Not everybody's going to like it. I fully expect that. But we could at least discuss it. And that's how you get things done in a league, is by discussing. You have conversations. You find out, maybe there's a point of view you didn't know. I was dead set in favor of every team getting a payout in the early years when we were putting this league together. Not even thinking about the playoff leased money that you get back. I got more money from leasing players this year than I think I did for finishing in last. So I came around to that. You have discussion. You see other points of view from people. And okay, maybe now I believe it's the top teams. Even though I'm not going to be a playoff team this year, I think it should be the top teams that do make the playoffs, because the non-playoff teams are getting leasing money. So I implore you, send your topics that you want to discuss or any possible rule changes in. The deadline is August 15th, so get those into the commissioner before those owner meetings, because they are very important. This is how we are going to shape the league. And if they don't have the agenda, they're not going to search through Telegram to go find the idea that you had. If it's not emailed in, it will not be discussed. So that's one of the things I'm going to want to discuss. I'd love to hear from many of you. DM me, ask your questions. I don't have all the answers. I just want to start discussing it. I think if you want to make a rule change, you need to make a presentation. If you want to throw something up for discussion and get the conversation going and then throw it up in a mid-season meeting, that I think that's the way to go. Rule changes, present the facts, present the evidence. A discussion, just get the ball rolling. So that's what I plan to do with that particular discussion and a few others that I have as well. Speaking of discussions, how have we kept him waiting for so long? Let's now bring in the UFHL insider, Larry Fisher, on UFHL Now.
Time to get the scoop on the UFHL with our insider, Larry Fisher. He's had lines in the water all week long. What will he reel in for us today? Let's dive in and find out what's going on with the UFHL now.
All right, welcoming in our UFHL insider, Larry Fisher, on a date I think that we should all be wearing goalie masks today, Larry. It is, of course, Friday the 13th, so in honor of that guy who scared us all in our childhood, but also in honor of this jersey over my shoulder, Tony Esposito, who I just love the mask. You know, I didn't get to watch him in his prime, but looking back on some of the video, and he just looks so cool in that jersey. So I got a Wheat King mask I could always throw on and do the show, but I don't think people would be able to hear that well. So we'll just kind of give a tribute to goalie masks everywhere today in honor of Jason Voorhees and Tony Esposito. Weird combination, but I know you must have been a big mask guy growing up.
Yeah, I love the masks. Cujo was my guy. I had a Curtis Joseph mask, and I actually custom painted, got a fish scenery ocean mask at one point too. I got custom painted. So I love the masks. That was big. That was part of the fun, especially the younger you are playing goal. Having the coolest mask was a big part of it. But yeah, certainly rest in peace to Tony Esposito with his loss. And Friday the 13th, I think I've seen them all a few times, and like a good horror movie. Yeah, definitely looking forward to a not so scary episode of UFHL Now.
Yeah, no kidding. I was, the only time I ever got to wear an actual mask was in street hockey. I grew up where you had to wear the helmet, so I had like a Winwell helmet and a cage, which I still have. But when I would look at like hockey cards, like this guy's mask right here, Grant Fuhr, she just had some all-timers. So, and Andy Moog had some great ones. Once they went to those full masks, it was pretty cool. But yes, this episode will not be as scary as Jason Voorhees coming back time and time after again and ending up, maybe they'll do an episode. Jason takes the UFHL someday or something like that, and he'll invade a draft or something like that. But we do have a lot of things to talk about, and first up on the list is a trade for a defenseman involving this team, us, Duckman's Domination. So I'll let you take that away.
Yeah, Dean, Duckmans are news. Duckman's Domination. They were a big talking point last week coming out of the entry auction and really retooling and taking those steps forward to being competitive. And certainly they've managed to land Dougie Hamilton as their latest big name addition, as well as Kamikaze's 2022 second round pick from Assassins. In exchange for Nolan Patrick, Logan Stankoven, Simon Robertson, and Emil Viro. So 3 prospects and Nolan Patrick. And I know it must pain you, Dean, to let go of Nolan Patrick because of the branding connection. And now he's reunited with Kelly McCrimmon in Vegas. He has the migraine, chronic migraines, which is a really scary thing. And it's not necessarily concussion related, it's migraines. But hopefully he can get past that because we all saw how talented he was as a teenager in the Western Hockey League. But Dougie Hamilton going to New Jersey, going to be quarterbacking the power play there. Such a big name. You look at the pieces coming together for New Jersey. They're going to have healthy Nico Hischier. Jack Hughes is just another summer stronger. He's going to be that much better. I think the Devils are going to take a step forward along with Duckmans this year, thanks to this trade. But I look at it, Dean, and I really, as much as I'm, as you know, a big Logan Stankoven fan, and I hate to lose him, and I still have hope for Nolan Patrick to pan out as obviously a top 5 pick from his draft year. I do think it's obvious that Dougie Hamilton is the best and most proven player in the deal. I'm sure Assassins had some salary consideration here because obviously Dougie Hamilton got the $9 million deal, and a lot of franchises in the UFHL are a lot closer to the ceiling than Duckmans. So they have to, come up with some strategy to free up some cap space as well. But all in all, I think a very fair trade, and I think it gives Duckmans a real formidable top 4 on defense, considering you had previously acquired Colton Parayko and recently TJ Brody, and Dante Fabro obviously is one guy you've drafted and developed in-house, but adding Dougie Hamilton to that mix is an impressive start for Duckmans' defense.
Yeah, this was a deal that went back and forth and stopped, and I sometimes people maybe don't realize, how long a deal can take to work out. I mean, I negotiated the Justin Schultz deal last year almost all season with a couple of different teams, and so this one went back and forth. And originally Dougie Hamilton was a guy that we had targeted. We saw the contract. We have our space. We know what we want to do. We think we have some pretty good prospects on the blue line that are close to stepping in and being able to contribute. But I think we have some more forwards, and I'm counting on the 2022 draft and the 2 high picks that I think we're going to have there. So I'm counting those players in forwards being ready to play, and some of the guys that we have on our high-end prospect list are forwards. So we wanted to acquire some really skilled blue liners that I think, and I like that top 4. And by no means is this our top 4 for the 2022-2023 season, when it is our goal to really be competitive. But I think this is a pretty good base, and there's still some interest in some different players. We almost actually moved 2 of these players out of this core in another deal, and still could happen. Who knows? So we like this because, as you mentioned, for all the things for Dougie Hamilton, it fits right now. We can afford to take on that cap. We're going to start helping older women and older ladies across the street, and petting stray dogs and feeding them. Try to get some of that Bentley Jacks karma going, and maybe Jeff Skinner gets bought out, and that really helps us. Because I'll tell you this, I think Jeff Skinner at not $9 million can be a pretty valuable player. I just don't think you fall off of a cliff like that. I think there was obviously something wrong in Buffalo, and still is. So whether it's, I sort of hope he gets bought out and does it somewhere else, so he's not making $9 million. But if at the very least, if he doesn't get bought out because he's playing so well, that's also a bonus. So we're still needing a little bit of things to go our way, but I really like the direction that we are going, and with some of the prospects still to come that are going to fill some of those other spots.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Dean, is that not only do you have your top 4 of current, quality NHL players, proven top 4 guys, you got a stream of prospects coming. You got Pierre-Olivier Joseph, who played a bit last year in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh needs some young blue liners coming up. He's going to get some opportunity there, along with a guy like John Marino. But then you got guys like Philip Broberg, Matthew Robertson, Jordan Harris in Montreal, Henry Thrun and Jacob Truscott, 2 guys came through the program in the U.S. that maybe not a lot of people know, but have some good upside, some good puck-moving ability. And then the guys that Duckmans drafted in this year's entry auction, Corson Kuhlmans, Daniil Chayka, and Shea Byam. I think any of those 3, I don't know if they're going to be in the NHL 2 years from now when you're ready to compete, but as this rebuild progresses into, like I said, championship contender or perennial contender, I think you can go down the pipeline for Duckmans, and you got 9 quality defense prospects on the way. So that bodes well when you have a feeder system of 9 guys coming up, and you only really got to fill 2 spots in your top 6. So I think as well, you could package some of those defense prospects for another Dougie Hamilton, another impact player in their prime. So you definitely have options going forward on the defense with Duckmans.
Yeah, and that's what we wanted to do. When I look at our cap situation going into free agency, I think we pointed out I had like $36 million in cap space, but we were prospect rich. And so we've spent some of that. We've spent some of that cap. I think we're at like just over 71,000, which is a pretty comfortable spot to be in. We can still take on some contracts for Sweetener. We're not going to take on long-term contracts anymore. We did that once already with Jeff Skinner. TJ Brody is a bit of a longer term, as 3 years at a guy that's 31 years old, but we can take on some more contracts in the short term, 1 year deals that a team needs to get a little bit of relief from with some sweetener. But we also now have options to wait until next year's free agency. I've already talked to teams that are going to be under the gun next year because of contracts that their players have signed that kicked in next year. So we're starting those negotiations. We can be patient. We can be in the driver's seat a little bit in this. The other team still needs to, but I felt we were in the driver's seat a little bit in the Dougie Hamilton deal and some of these other ones because they need to have their cap space. And the next deal that you're going to talk about, we were in that one as well. We just didn't want to spend the prospects it was going to take for this particular player, but more defensemen on the move.
Yeah, Dougie Hamilton to Duckmans wasn't the only top pairing D donning a new UFHL uniform next season. Obviously, John Carlson is another big name guy, and the Yetis keep wheeling and dealing too. They're always busy. Scott Lowater's a known wheeler and dealer, and John Carlson, Dean, is on his way to the Godfathers in exchange for Matt Gerzlik and Warren Foegele. And Warren Foegele obviously just traded to Edmonton. Scott Lowater's and his owners are Oilers fans, so I'm sure they're happy to have Foegele for that reason. But again, I think this comes down to cap considerations. And the funny thing here, Dean, is that John Carlson never actually suited up as a Yeti. He was only acquired from Assassins, who obviously you just acquired Dougie Hamilton from. They had Hamilton and John Carlson at one point. But the Yetis previously acquired John Carlson from the Assassins on July 1st for Ryan O'Reilly, Yanni Hakanpää, and a late second-round pick in this year's draft. So you look at that and Ryan O'Reilly, Yanni Hakanpää. But again, I think this comes down to salary cap considerations for the Yetis. As we mentioned, I believe last week they had Tyson Barrie re-sign, and I believe they acquired another defenseman in that $4 or $5 million range. So between the two of them, they're kind of eating up that John Carlson money. So I think it was a cap consideration, but at the same time, I think the Yetis were looking at another John, and they saw one that's at a lower cap at half price for this year. And so they swung two trades, John Carlson out and John Klingberg in for the Yetis. And here you see the second deal, Dean. The Stingrays sending John Klingberg, Zach Sanford, and Ryan Hartman to the Yetis in exchange for Eric Chernak, Scott Lawton, and Kiefer Sherwood. So no doubt Scott Lowater had both these deals in the works at the same time, knowing that if he moved out John Carlson, he had John Klingberg coming back because they were made within 24 hours of each other. So that's some handiwork by the general manager. And it's funny here because I think the Stingrays, Arlo Scholz, probably got spooked by all these $9 million extensions for top defenders. John Klingberg is a pending UFA next summer at $4.25 million for the coming season. You can guarantee that'll be doubled even with a decent season. He'll be coming in at that 8.5 range, and he could be joining the $9 million club with another big year from John Klingberg, especially being that he's a pending UFA. UFAs always get paid generally more than RFAs because there could be a bidding war on the open for John Klingberg. So I think Stingrays took a look at that and knowing they have guys like Adam Fox that are going to get a big deal as well, and just realized their cap situation wasn't going to fit with Klingberg long-term. And the Yetis, I asked Scott Lowater about that. I said, are you worried that Klingberg's going to be the next $9 million man? And all he said is that's a next year problem. So we know Scott Lowater likes to wheel and deal. There's a good chance John Klingberg might be a rental type situation where the Yetis maximize what he can bring to their team at $4.25 million for the coming season. And next year at this time, we're talking about the Yetis moving John Klingberg once he signs his massive extension, assuming that he has another solid year for Dallas.
Well, and that's the name of the game is can it help you now? And you don't just totally forget about it, but It's almost, I had a producer at TSN 1260 that would say that's future Mark's problem for him. He would be worried about that later. But you do have to keep an eye on the future, because certainly teams like myself, and there are lots of other teams out there. Well, not lots, but there are other teams out there that have cap space that, you know, should be looking at these things as well. I mean, we were in the John Carlson discussions, but we looked at, okay, we had already acquired Dougie Hamilton, so now we don't need to go after John Carlson as much because Hamilton is younger. He's joining a situation that I think is definitely on the way up. I think Carlson passing to Ovechkin, you got to be excited about that. But, you know, what is happening in Washington? At some point, Carlson at 31 and Ovechkin are going to be retiring or moving on. So I'm not sure Washington can maybe turn it around as fast as where New Jersey is going. But it's all choices. And then, man, I would have loved to have been in the discussions for John Klingberg. And I hope to be next year when that's a next year problem for the Yetis, because, you know, another team that you know, we have, you know, and we'll try to start discussions from and I'm sure other teams are doing this as well. I don't think it's ever too early to start discussions on, you know, what value a player might have, and then that value might change during the season. That's the risk of going into a player's free agency in the UFHL is, you know, maybe the Stingrays are getting ahead of things because they know that, as you said, that's at least going to $8 million. So the teams that are proactive as far as the cap and you know, not getting stuck with those contracts aren't under the gun to make the trade with teams like me who are going to force them into a deal maybe they didn't want to have to make.
For sure, and I think those franchises are aware that there's teams out there that have cap space, and if you know, it gets to next summer and John Klingberg signs that big deal and Adam Fox signs a big deal, and all of a sudden the Stingrays are and they have Zach Werenski as well, and Zach Werenski's one of those $9 million men. So you can't have three $9 million defenders on a salary cap league, and that's the beauty of the Dynasty League, Dean, is you can always be looking ahead because you know, the players carry over from year to year. So it's a great format, and it's a great way to really mirror the real world, which is what UFFS and the UFHL are all about, is trying to, you know, be as close to the NHL as possible. And one thing that I found interesting with this latest trade involving John Klingberg, Dean, is it's surprising to me that the Yetis and Stingrays have become quite the trading partners or trade partners, despite being division rivals. They're both top 10 contending franchises from the Lemieux division. They faced off in the playoffs. The Stingrays upset the Yetis in the first round of the playoffs. You know, they're probably going to be clashing every year in the playoffs. These are franchises that are really going head to head in that Lemieux division, battling for top spot, or they're in there with the Ice Vikings. But, you know, they previously pulled off the Mitch Marner blockbuster back in April before the trade deadline. Was that, you know, when Scott Lowater first took over as Yetis GM, and then to see them circle back and make another blockbuster now involving John Klingberg in the offseason. So it's just interesting to see how division rivalries, and especially when they're both at the same stage. It's not like one's rebuilding and one's contending. They're both battling for that, you know, for position within their division and within the overall standings in the top 10. So interesting to see that Scott Lowater and Arlo Schultz have come together on two real big deals as division rivals.
Yeah, we'll see which one of those deals pays off for the other. If, Klingberg ends up coming through in a playoff series or something, wouldn't that be interesting? But what's going on with, I believe it's Kamikaze. What are they doing with Vlad Tarasenko? Hearing his name come up in some chats.
Yeah, he might be a Bentley Jacks type player here, Dean, where he's a short stay with Kamikaze because Donnie Talk recently acquired Vladimir Tarasenko, and he's been name dropping him a couple times on the trade block in recent weeks, including this past week. Obviously, I think the thing there is nobody knows what to expect from Vladimir Tarasenko going forward. He's got some shoulder surgeries, shoulder injuries, and you know the kind of player he is. He's sort of a power forward, like he's a physical, strong guy who relies on his strength, but also he's got that shot, right? That's what made him such a valuable fantasy player, is he's got a wicked shot. And does he still have that same velocity? Can he return to form? Kamikaze willing to take a chance on him, acquiring Vladimir Tarasenko and Colin Miller from Dynasty in exchange for Rasmus Anderson, William Carrier, and a 2023 second-round pick. That deal, they just acquired Vladimir Tarasenko within the last week. No sooner did he arrive than did his name come back up on Kamikaze's updated trade block. Actually, both Vlad Tarasenko and Colin Miller are on the updated trade block. So I think that might be a situation, Dean, and this happens a lot, and especially in fantasy, not so much in the real world because families and lives and moving cities and everything else. But in fantasy, if you think you got a guy, you can get a guy on the cheap and you think, hey, I can flip this guy tomorrow for more than what I'm getting him for, you make the deal. And even if you don't love the player, you start shopping him right away because you think you're getting a bargain. I don't necessarily know if that's the case. I think Mark Yates and Ed Palumbo, again, with Dynasty taking over, they're continuing to shed salary from the payroll for Ryan Malone. Cap issues are no longer a concern there for Dynasty thanks to this deal. Now Vladimir Tarasenko's off the books. And again, it's kind of buyer beware with Vladimir Tarasenko. Can he return to form or not? But I think, I look at the deal from Dynasty's perspective, and Rasmus Andersson's really an underrated defenseman. I think now that Mark Giordano's gone in Calgary, I think you're going to see Rasmus Andersson really step up into a bit of a leadership role, but certainly be one of their go-to defenders. And so really, I think they got a nice piece back. But again, it's not a huge price to pay for Vladimir Tarasenko. And therefore, I think that's why Kamikaze is debating whether or not they're keeping or flipping Tarasenko.
Oh man, it's so interesting to watch and see the different teams and the value that players and even through negotiations you can kind of get a feel for it, but until an actual trade goes through, you're like, oh, okay, so that's the value that player put on for or franchise put on for whatever reason they might be going. And teams, it's going to still continue to happen throughout the offseason to get cap compliant. And the Ice Vikings are another team that, did an extremely well this year, but they have to make room going forward.
The reigning regular season champions, Dean, and certainly much like Red Army did before Luc Renier sold the franchise as Klein Cup champions, as playoff champions. Red Army had to cut, a lot of caps and got rid of big guys like Patrick Kane and a number of them. And we'll talk about Red Army here in a bit. But the Ice Vikings found themselves in the same boat, really, Dean, coming off a regular season win, first place in the regular season, and had a lot of they were close to the ceiling and they had to make some difficult decisions because you can't afford to keep everyone in the cap league. Obviously, they released Jamie Oleksiak to free agency after he signed his new $4.6 million contract with Seattle for 5 years. And Oleksiak was signed by the Snipers during the free agent frenzy auction. So he's now a member of the Snipers. But for the Ice Vikings, I think that this all goes back to freeing up cap space for their franchise player, that being Brady Tkachuk. And his extension is coming up as a talking point all around the hockey world because everyone's interested to see what he's going to get. And certainly we've talked about it on UFHL Now in recent episodes, Dean, noting that the Ice Vikings are facing a bit of a cap crunch once Brady Tkachuk signs. And we're assuming he's getting as much or more than his big brother Matthew, who's at $7 million with the Calgary Flames. But actually, Matthew has a $9 million qualifying offer after this coming season. So I don't see Calgary walking away from Matthew Tkachuk and losing him for nothing to free agency by not qualifying him. So Matthew Tkachuk's going to be a rich hockey player going forward as well. But so is Brady. And so the Ice Vikings, when they're looking at their cap situation, you let go $4.6 million of Jamie Oleksiak, lose him for nothing to free agency. And then now you take Chris Kreider, and they have a real Rangers thing going on with the Ice Vikings. Obviously, Mika Zibanejad's there, and their core was a lot of New York Rangers. But they had to lose Chris Kreider, sacrifice Chris Kreider to the Godfathers, in exchange for Ottawa goaltending prospect Levi Merilainen, who has been looking really good lately, as well as 3,000 score coins. So recoup some score for the operating budget for next season at the expense of Chris Kreider. Kreider obviously has $6.5 million cap hit for 6 more seasons. So between Kreider and Oleksiak, the Ice Vikings have trimmed $11.1 million. And again, no more cap woes for the Ice Vikings. Whatever Brady Tkachuk signs for now, they can be worry-free for the rest of the offseason and whatever the future holds for Tkachuk's contract. Dean, I would take over on if we're betting on $7 million. I think I'll take the over, even though Eugene Melnick's the one cutting the check there. I think they're going to have to pay up Brady Tkachuk because he is the franchise player, and I think they want to go long-term with him and really make him the face of the franchise. So I think he's going to be in that $8 to $9 million range I really do in Ottawa. So therefore, you take the 11.1 million, you give 8 million to Brady Tkachuk. And the other big raise that came as a bit of a surprise for the Ice Vikings, I think caught them a bit off guard, was Joel Eriksson-Ek. He had a really big extension signed. So they were forced to make room. You can't keep everyone in the cap league, like we said. So first they let Jamie Oleksiak go to free agency, and now they traded Chris Kreider for futures. But like I said, they got a good goaltending prospect back, and they got some score for the operating budget for next season to stay contending. But certainly the Ice Vikings are going to look a little different just because they had to make some sacrifices due to the salary cap.
Well, it should be really interesting when Brady Tkachuk signs his deal and Matthew Tkachuk signs his deal, when they sit around the Tkachuk fireplace and Keith is like, I made $11 and $10 million in one season, so you boys have a little bit to catch up. Now, Brady and Matthew are going to surpass Keith in career earnings because that was near the end of his career, but he still will have the mantle around the Tkachuk family fire is probably making the most per year, unless one of those guys gets into the $11 million. So that'll be interesting about that, and will be humorous, as was a trade this week. Not very often we can characterize a trade as humorous. A lot of times it's good, bad, fair for both sides. You don't hear a lot of, that was a funny trade, but we had one this week.
Yeah, thanks to Mooch and Red Army for bringing the lighter side of fantasy hockey, and Oscar Sundqvist to the Bentley Jacks for Gustav Nyquist in a 1-for-1 swap. And, fair trade, whatever the case, a fairly minor deal that may not have made it onto UFHL Now. Even looking at it, you kind of glance over it. But then Mooch comes out in the owner chat with this gem of a quote, Dean. He says, "I told my GM last night the proper spelling is Quist, not Quist. So I told him to get us a guy that properly spells his last name. I am adding a lot to my team since I bought it. We are not going to have misspelled names on Red Army." So obviously he prefers the QU instead of the QB on Quist. So, but Gustav Nyquist could have a bounce back year. And for the Bentley Jacks, I think, St. Louis protected Oscar Sundqvist as well. So I think they see value there and a cheaper player. But all in all, I think, Dean, it was worth having a good laugh, and we all needed a good laugh after the week it's been. So thanks to Mooch for providing that some hilarity and some humor into the UFHL through this trade.
Yeah, I wonder just what that conversation was like for Jeff Ray and Brennan Kopp sitting there going, so, hey, my owner really does not like the spelling of this guy's name. Can you help me out here? Like, I think that would be a comical. That's where we need like the real in the office conversations that we can tap into. But having said that, Red Army was busy with a few other things as well.
Yeah, it was a busy week for Jeff Ray. And again, we mentioned Luc Grenier and cutting salary and he was, in the same time, he was recouping his investment in Scorecoin. So he let go, traded away 13 players from the active roster. Jeff Ray took over about a month ago, and his priority has been, let's fill those 13 roster spots. Luke didn't touch his top end. His core that Jeff Ray inherited is still arguably the best in the league for young talent. Guys on entry-level contracts and all the rest. But his more veteran guys, his depth guys, he really depleted that side, and Jeff Ray's doing his best to recoup that. So actually, Jeff Ray was able to trade recent buyout victim James Neal to the Mystics for a cap dump, taking on Anton Strawman, who might, rebound in Arizona. He'll have a big role in Arizona. Red Army also acquired in that deal Mitchell Stevens, who's also in a new home in Detroit, and Detroit goaltending prospect Jan Bednash, and a 2022 second-round pick. So you get 3 assets in order to take on a cap dump in Anton Strawman. And obviously, with James Neal, the fact he was bought out, Dean, that means whatever his new contract ends up being, wherever James Neal signs, if it's for $1 million, Mystics only inherit that. They don't have to worry about any cap recapture. So for Mystics, a nice cap savings on Anton Strawman, awaiting the new deal for James Neal. But Red Army gets a few pieces, again, some depth there. And then most recently, Dean, just last night, actually, they dealt Vegas forward prospect Zach Dean, who was recently purchased in the entry auction. This might be breaking news, Dean. I'm not sure if this trade's even out there yet. Prior to the recording.
It just came through right now as we are recording this. So it's kind of funny for us. People have known about this trade for a while, but for you and I just saw this now.
Yeah, so I was privy to it last night, but I knew it hadn't been approved when we started the show. But certainly they've recently traded or now traded Vegas forward prospect Zach Dean, who was a recent purchase in the entry auction, an investment they made through the entry auction with Zach Dean. They've traded him to Kamikaze for Vegas forward Nicholas Waugh and Chris Tierney from Ottawa. So again, Red Army recouping depth with their latest moves. And this is a Vegas forward prospect, Zach Dean, for a current Vegas forward, Nicholas Waugh. So I think I do think there's some upside with Nicholas Roy. And obviously Zach Dean being a first-round pick for Vegas is a nice prospect for Kamikaze. And Donnie Talk, again, just continuing to build around this group of first-rounders. Kamikaze has, much like Duckmans, has a real impressive pipeline coming. And I think when you take that step, I think we're going to see Kamikaze trying to take the step in that same season, becoming more and more competitive in the meantime. But certainly for Red Army, they keep us on our toes with Jeff Ray and Mooch with the lighter side, the humorous swap of the Quists. And now breaking news, giving us some breaking news to talk about too, was Zach Dean for Nicholas Waugh and Chris Tierney.
I have no idea how you guys managed to time that out for the exact recording of this, but it's magician-like, much like when yourself and Andrea and Nathan have saved weekends and drafts. It's magician-like. So bravo on that and the timing for this show. Let's get to a few teams that have a few guys on the block right now that they are floating for various reasons.
Yeah, Dean, we can run through these for sure. And Rock Republic, we can start with taking offers on Timo Meier. And it's funny that Kyle Roberts floated that out. Hey, we're taking offers on Timo Meier. And of course, instantly the comments started coming in. Oh, you must have read the Athletic article too, because the wording in the Athletic was that Timo Meier is really the only wingman or running mate off the ice for Evander Kane. Obviously, the Evander Kane situation, they're trying to move him out of San Jose now, and then there's some unrest in the locker room about Evander Kane's latest controversy or conspiracy, and they just noted that the only guy that really hangs out with Evander Kane or under Evander Kane has taken Timo Meier under his wing, you can say, and that might not be the best for Timo Meier. He's coming off a down year, didn't play up to his standards this past season, and maybe that's from hanging around with Evander Kane too much, but certainly, I think there's a market for Timo Meier both in the NHL and the UFHL if San Jose or Rock Republic are seriously trying to trade Timo Meier. Evander Kane, I think that's a much tougher sell in both leagues. Kane's experienced turmoil for a second straight offseason. He had the bankruptcy ordeal last summer. Now he's dealing with the gambling allegations, potential divorce or pending divorce. So we all know Evander Kane's been a bit of a disaster off the ice, but again, a big-time contributor on the ice to the Ice Vikings regular season titles. So take the good with the bad with Evander Kane, but certainly I think Timo Meier's name is out there because of his connection to Evander Kane in both the NHL and the UFHL. And then the Royals, Dean, they're continuing their shakeup as well. Arnie Entz and the Royals have been one of the big movers and shakers this offseason. And now they're shopping Kevin Fiala, who's a pending RFA. He's going to get a big raise in Minnesota as well. We don't know what that contract's going to come in at, but he's going to get paid. And they're dangling Kevin Fiala and Antti-Ranta as a package deal. So looking to move one of their goaltenders attached to Kevin Fiala. So there should be interest there. But again, the Royals, Dean, they've already traded their two best prospects, Quentin Byfield and Bowen Byram, this offseason. And they're really taking a step forward. They're trying to go into win now mode in the Howe division, bolstering that supporting cast for Alex Ovechkin because they know they don't have. Well, I guess they got 5 more years of Alex Ovechkin. He signed a 5-year extension, but who knows how many more 50-goal seasons Alex Ovechkin's got in him. So they actually went out and acquired a guy we've been talking about, Matthew Tkachuk, from the Stallions in exchange or in a bigger deal that involved Quentin Byfield. And then they did the fun 1-for-1 swap with Red Army, who we were just talking about, getting Tim Stützle for Bowen Byram in those recent blockbusters. Royals also acquired Jacob Slavin from the Gators, Chandler Stevenson from the Grizzlies this offseason. So Arnie Entz has been busy, and his latest name he's floated out there is Kevin Fiala.
Yeah, this is Arnie fascinates me. The amount, like every time I get a DM, he's like, I told Brent I wouldn't be doing anything else, but I really want to try to do this. So he's always tinkering, and I think that can be really valuable, especially if you like you've said, if you can get an instant upgrade or whatever it is. And, some of those trades are fairly even with some of the prospects. The Patrick Kane thing is really interesting, and the Timo Meier, because in that article, the word hate came up. Like, my client hates, and the only person he hates, more than Timo Meier is Kane or whatever it was. And let's not forget, I think Evander Kane is terrific on the ice and as he recently said, one of his, productive seasons. But let's remember what happened way back in Winnipeg, right? Like, this was a guy who was already now he's going to be possibly on his third organization because problems in the locker room. You don't get a sweatsuit thrown in the shower or the freezer or whatever it is. And if you're, there's obviously problems. So, it's definitely buyer beware in the UFHL. We don't have any control over the personalities and things like that, but you have to take some of that into consideration before you trade for some of these guys, long term. And Timo Meier, I know way back when Hernan Salas owned the team, he was the guy that he was trying to get as much as he could from to try to, or build around. And I'm surprised that he has kind of fallen off. So hopefully, for everybody's sake, those guys can return to the game and, sort out whatever personal issues are going on. But they're obviously not the only team with some trade options.
For sure, Dean. And having those two, forwards that should be in the prime of their career or are in the prime of their career, Timo Meier and Kevin Fiala on the trade block. I would be surprised if we're not talking about one of those in the coming weeks. Once their name's out there, I'm sure there will be interest in both of them. We mentioned goaltender in there as well. Antti Raanta, the Royals. Antti Raanta has been a bit of a suitcase in the UFHL. Mm-hmm. He's been bouncing around as well, but his name's out there again. And certainly the Brutes, Dean, are debating their goalie trade options because they acquired Jake Allen as part of an expansion draft trade with the Bentley Jacks. Bentley Jacks drafted him and flipped him to the Brutes. Speaking of suitcases, but yeah, so Jake Allen lands with the Brutes. They already had Philip Grubauer, who obviously was a surprise. He left Colorado to go to Seattle, but he's a long-term starting goalie for the Brutes, one of their franchise players. And then they have James Reimer, who now has been signed in San Jose, and he's there with Aiden Hill, and nobody really knows who's going to be the starter there, if they're going to be a full platoon. But Jesse Gill, the owner and GM of the Brutes, has come out and sort of said, I'm starting to think James Reimer is going to get a good share of the workload in San Jose, more so than Jake Allen's going to get behind Carey Price in Montreal. Because I think when Jesse made that deal with the Bentley Jacks to get Jake Allen, there was a lot of speculation Carey Price was going to miss the first half of the season or extended time. He was going to get a bunch of surgeries like Shea Weber. Turns out Carey Price had a minor procedure and he should be ready for training camp. So Carey Price still a workhorse. I mean, I'm sure they'll give Jake Allen some time, but Jesse's looking at that saying maybe James Reimer is going to get more playing time than Jake Allen. So maybe now I'll listen to offers on Jake Allen instead of trying to, focus on shopping James Reimer as the odd man out. But three's a crowd in the crease there for the Brutes, and somebody's got to go. So time will tell whether that is Jake Allen or James Reimer. But right now, Jake Allen seems to be the name that Jesse's at least trying to see what kind of interest there is from around the league. Especially if franchises lost a goaltender in the expansion draft, they're probably going to try and recoup one. So I think the Brutes are in a decent position here, but everybody knows that October roster deadline is looming, and any of those two would have to go through waivers to not start on the active roster. So the closer we get to October, the more pressure the Brutes have to take what they can get for a goaltender. But right now they're looking for a quality return for either Jake Allen, who's in a good position in Montreal with Carey Price, or James Reimer, who could potentially be a starting goaltender again in the NHL next season with San Jose.
Yeah, and that's the weighing of, do I wait to try to get a better deal, or you risk waiting too long and teams will just be like, well, I'll just you're going to have to feed one through the waivers, and I'll just take them, take my chances with Score and try to buy him that way. So it is a delicate balance in that way for sure. Okay, that's some really good stuff on what the owners and the franchises have been doing and the GMs with the wheeling and dealing. But man, scouts have been extremely busy, as I'm sure you can attest with all the work that you guys are doing behind the scenes to get this going. But let's start with a very successful sellout for the futures auction.
Absolutely, Dean. We could definitely shed the spotlight on the scouts because they've been the busiest within the UFFS ecosystem this past week. Certainly we had the first futures auction, or second annual futures auction, I should say, but the first one on our UFFS new platform. And it was the first auction that went successful and smooth, and the tech all worked. So that was great. And it was a lot of fun to watch that auction play out. But there were some surprises there too, Dean. I think, especially because everybody was sort of waiting to see how the tech would work off the start. And the first two names up were arguably the two biggest names in my mind, Cole Iserman and Berkeley Catan. And they went a little cheaper than I anticipated. I thought those two went for somewhat bargain prices. But Macklin Celebrini, who was a teammate of Cole Iserman, didn't put up quite as many points, but a very impressive forward prospect. And Emil Vini, a Finnish goaltender, emerged as the top sellers from this year's futures auction. And Aaron Kiviharju, as expected, was the top selling D. And one cool thing here, Dean, I thought throughout the futures auction is, in my opinion, the scouts that went in with a specific target, the vast majority of them, and from talking to the scouts since then, leading up to and since the futures auction, the guys that went in with a target, they mostly all came away happy and got their guy. And that's always fun because an auction, it's the highest bidder, right, Dean? So, and you got to have a stopping point. Everybody has a budget. So it's always fun going into those auctions where you really want a guy, but then at some point you just got to let him go, right? But in this case, the vast majority of the guys that really wanted somebody got them. And one that maybe didn't right off the top, Dean, was Cole Iserman. Arnie's been name-dropping Cole Iserman all year leading up to the futures auction. I know Arnie really wanted him, and he actually stopped a bit short, maybe $30 or $40 short on Cole Iserman. Probably the first name up didn't know if he was going for thousands or what, so Arnie bowed out a bit early there. But Arnie did get Adam Jaco and got some other players that he was really happy about as well. But again, the guys that went to get their targets were guys like Aaron Kiviharju, who Dan Nadeau has coached against him. He's friends with Aaron Kiviharju's dad. So that was a guy that he just couldn't lose. And then same with Seth Tansom. Seth Tansom's dad, Jason, was my first boss in the working world. And in the newspaper world, he was my first publisher. And he was also the general manager of the Junior B team that Dan and myself played on. So it's funny to see Seth now, who wasn't even born at the time we were playing Junior B, is now in our futures auction. And Dan was able to win that bidding war as well. So some fun stories coming out of the futures auction. The big spenders, Can West Scouting Agency, Harrison Fallow, Curtis Johnson obviously heads up the Can West Fantasy Sports Group, but they spent the most and won the two biggest bidding wars with Celebrini and Vinny. And then Spitfire Scouting, Dean, Dale Hardy, who had the biggest returns coming out of the entry auction. He really reinvested as well and purchased the most prospects from the futures auction with 10. His two biggest prospects coming out of the futures auction were Alexei Dontsov and Clark Caswell. So certainly reloaded for Spitfire Scouting, reinvested their profits that they accumulated from the entry auction, and certainly for Can West Scouting as well to step up and win the two biggest bidding wars, which really set them up to be the highest spending agency in the futures auction.
Well, I remember it's interesting looking back to the futures auction last year when Trish and High Level and Craig Button were bidding, and Atu Radi went early, I think for $300, and then and at that point he was considered the top pick, and then others, as the draft went on at different years, went for a little bit more. So maybe it's just that early auction, guys don't want to spend a lot, girls don't want to spend a lot, and then as they get going, the wallet loosens up a little bit. So that was interesting, and I know that this has been a lot of work, but a labor of love, let's say, the open market frenzy turning into a draft for 2024.
Dean, this was, we were really looking forward to the open market frenzy on Monday, and then the tech had another glitch, and we had to turn it into a draft. But the scouts really rallied around that. They all submitted draft lists, and full credit to Nathan Bender, one of the founders, who helps out a ton on the tech side as well. And he's an Excel wizard, and he whipped up this draft and made it process much quicker than I could have done with the old school. Going through each list and taking the top player throughout each round. It would have taken forever, but Nathan was able to expedite the process. And actually, Dean, 2024 eligibles to date, 64, all 64 that were up for auction in the futures auction, which is obviously 2 rounds worth of an NHL draft, they all sold. And Dean, as of now, we have 210 through the open market draft. Which is pretty incredible. And I can say that also in the open market, there's been 9 others registered today again that were just, guys that were registered after the open market draft was over. Anybody who wasn't drafted there is now available from those 2024 eligibles. The open market's open again, you can say. So they're still coming in. So you can say 274 total. Dean, if all the open market prospects are registered, there's still some that are waiting. And that was sort of, you draft them, see who you get in this draft, and then it's sort of optional whether or not you register them. But the vast majority have been registered. I think we're down to the last 3 or 4 scouts to register their prospects that they came away with from the open market draft. But we could have up to 274 of the 2024 eligibles already registered, Dean. And that's a huge number when you think about it. We're 3 full seasons away from that NHL draft in 2024 and that entry auction for the UFHL franchises. In that NHL draft, 224 prospects will get picked that are 2024 eligibles. We're already at 274 in the first week have been added. And it's funny though, Dean, when we did the futures auction, we had 64 players up for auction. And I said, I got 108 prospects here that I consider potential first round talents. Do you guys want me to auction them all off, or do you want to keep it to 2 rounds so it mirrors the entry auction and there's only bidding wars on 64? The scouts preferred that. So the other 44 prospects went back into the open market. And shockingly to me, there's still actually now I should say 8 of them remain on the open market because one of them was plucked this morning. But there's 6 forwards, 1 defenseman, and 1 goaltender on my list still that I had eyeing that were just missing the cut for the futures auction. So there's still some good guys out there, even though we're at 274 owned, and 3 years from now, 3 full seasons from now, only 224 are going to get drafted. So it just goes to show how active the scouts are, Dean. And as you've seen at the bottom there, the milestone as well as part of this week with the 2024 eligibles being introduced and now being available on the open market. We've surpassed 4,000 total players registered on the UFFS platform. So that's another big accomplishment. What other fantasy league has 4,000 players attached to it, really? I run some pretty deep fantasy leagues that I've been commissioner of, and, we're at that 700, 800 total range. Maybe we don't have 32 franchises. You have 28 or whatever, but still, I don't know of any other fantasy leagues that have more than maybe 1,000 or 1,500 total prospects and players involved in their fantasy league. And here at the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League and the scouting side, we have over 4,000 players registered now.
And more. I mean, we're talking about a draft that is, as you mentioned, 3 full years away. And this is just how it works. A lot of those players are going to drop, and then there's going to be another wave of players that people are going to be registering over the next 3 years that are going to take their place. So you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. It all depends on, what your equation is, what your format is. But, you think about like the going into the 2021 draft, there were still players being added going into our draft. So this is a thing that's going to be fluid, and 3 years from now, I can't imagine what that number is going to be that we're at. So that's really cool. And I thought something that also was really neat within the scouting community is the cooperation. I mean, everybody's competing for these players, but one particular player kind of took you down a bit of a rabbit hole to find out the exact date, because as you've mentioned on previous shows, and as I've tried to as I found out trying to help out Trish find different players that Craig has been recommending, this information for 2024 isn't readily available on just a site anywhere. You sometimes got to really work to find the exact details you need, or else you're registering the wrong player.
Exactly, Dean. You don't want to register a placeholder, and the main thing you need is the birth date, the date of birth, because obviously you can't go by the year, because unlike the WHL and other leagues that go January to December, the NHL has that September 15th cutoff. So it's very important that that player, even if they're born in 2006, they're not born between September 16th and December 31st, or else they carry over to next year, and they're part of the 2025 eligibles and 2025 futures auction. So the name that was out there, Dean, was Jonas Wu, who's actually the younger brother of Vancouver Canucks defense prospect Jet Wu. Jonas has been making a lot of waves throughout last season and prior seasons. You know, he's played at all the big showcases. He's well known as probably the top prospect in Manitoba for this year's WHL Bantam draft, which normally would be over by now. It's normally in May, but it got delayed until December. So Jonas Wu was a guy that I researched. I spent an hour on it, Dean, a solid hour trying to find his birth date because I wanted to include him in the futures auction. He would have been one of my guys, and I couldn't find it it's not available online. There's nowhere you can Google Jonas Wu's birth date. Well, now you can find it on Twitter, I guess, but there's nowhere you can find it online, no matter how hard you look for Jonas Wu's birth date. So then we had to, okay, what can we do next? Because Ash Glover, who actually drafted Jonas Wu in the open market draft as a shocking guy that wasn't part of the futures auction. Let's put a selection in here, and so he drafted him. So then I had to go back to work, and we all had to go to work and find Jonas Wu's birth date. Luckily, again, we have a real strong scouting community of real world scouts and aspiring scouts within UFFS. We're up to 62 scouts now, Dean. So there's been another bump in scouts since the futures auction and part of this open market process. But we all came together, kind of all hands on deck, trying to determine Jonas Wu's birth date. So we were texting his mom, we tweeted his brother, we were trying to get a hold of agents and coaches, and actually full credit to Ed Palumbo of Instat and Fanalytica.tech. He's the head scout for Fanalytica. Ed was actually the guy who came to us with the answer. Ed got it thanks to, I think I can drop this for Ed, but one of his sources, Rick LaCour from Wingman Player Consulting, reached out to the coach of Jonas Wu's youth team and was able to get that birth date. And then, Dean, no sooner did Ed post that than actually Jet Wu, and a big shout out to Jet for this, but he replied to my inquiry on Twitter and tweeted out the birth date as well, saying the kid can play. So the big brother is keeping tabs on young Jonas as well. But the birth date turned out to be November 19th, 2006. So as we know, Dean, as November birth dates, that's not necessarily a good thing in the hockey world. So Jonas is not draft eligible until 2025. He's got 4 full seasons before he's eligible for the NHL draft, which thus means he's not eligible for the open market. And therefore, all the scouts can write down the name Jonas Wu if they're listening, because he's available in next year's futures auction, where the scouts will announce their pick. They'll bid on a pick, and then they'll announce the prospect they want. But unfortunately for Ash Glover, he had to forfeit the open market draft pick, similar to when the Florida Panthers tried to draft Alex Ovechkin back in 2003. The birth date conspiracy and all the rest there. But in this case, like I said, though, quite the rabbit hole. I mean, I talked to Joel Henderson, who was an FC hockey colleague of mine. We scouted together for the last few seasons. He's now with Puck Preps, and Joel Henderson had live viewings. He was in the same rink as Jonas Wu this past weekend, where Jonas had another really strong showing, and Joel was raving about him. But again, same thing there. The program that was available, all it had was 2006, and they couldn't find it anywhere online. Ash Glover, the scout who tried to draft him, Dean, Ash was recently hired by the Medicine Hat Tigers in the WHL. He's working for Willie Desjardins as a scout. And Ash, actually, we had a handful of these prospects. We couldn't find birth dates anywhere online. Ash has access to RinkNet, and RinkNet just recently updated their birth date database, so he pulled out a few of these rabbits from the hat thanks to RinkNet, which obviously is an expensive program that not everybody has access to. But Ash was also mystified. They didn't have Jonas Wu on there either, and I reached out to Ash and said, what's going on here? And he said, to be honest, the WHL database that scouts access has NA. They don't even know, and he's getting drafted into the WHL. He's probably going to be a top 10 pick in December, and the WHL didn't even have his birth date for their scouting portal that all their scouts access. So thanks to Ed Palumbo and thanks to Big Brother Jet for clearing the air here, Dean, and credit to the entire UFFS scouting community to pull together and solve this mystery. But Jonas Wu's birth date is November 19th, 2006. So we'll be talking about him next summer in the futures auction.
Man, between scouts and GMs, there doesn't seem to be an off season. It's just an off ice, not playing season. I don't think I would ever refer to this as the off season anymore, because things never seem to end, and who knows what we'll be chatting about in the next week with more deals. To be honest, during this conversation, I already reached out to a GM to start some conversations about something else. So maybe we'll be talking about that next week. As always, Larry, terrific stuff. This is the best league in the world, and we need to cover it that way, and that's why we do this. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode, and we'll talk real soon.
Sounds good, Dean. I'm hoping for a little bit of a slowdown now in August, maybe a little slower, but it sounds like Duckmans are already hard at work to keep us busy for next week's show. And hey, we need something to talk about. We don't want to be making up rumors. It's always nice to cover actual trades and give our thoughts and how the trade came together as opposed to spewing rumors and starting stuff. So I appreciate all the franchises that are spending their summer wheeling and dealing on trades, and certainly the scouts that are always active year round.
You're watching the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, UFSN, your one-stop fantasy shop. Get in touch on Twitter at UFS Network. Email us, ufsn@uffsports.com.
Another busy, successful show. Thanks to Larry Fisher, our UFHL insider, and jack of all trades within the UFFS. And a big thanks to Andrea and Nathan for the work that they have done over the last little while to make sure things keep getting off the ground. I appreciate all the owners and the scouts and everybody involved having patience with this as we do something that has never been done before. There will be hiccups, but I think everybody has the right frame of mind moving in the right direction. All right, so the direction you need to be going to right now is to your computer. Type out that email with the owners' meetings topics you want discussed so we can discuss them at the owners' meetings coming up. The deadline is August 15th. That's going to wrap things up for me on the show. Big thanks, of course, to Larry Fisher for joining me on the UFHL Insider segment, and to you, the GMs, the owners, the scouts that listen to this show, that watch this show, that enjoy this show. Thank you very much. As I mentioned to Larry, we cover this league like we do because it's the greatest league in the world, and it deserves that coverage. We're back again next week with so many more exciting things to talk about here on UFHL Now. Maybe another trade from Duckman's domination. You just never know. Big thanks to Larry and to you, the viewer. Have yourself a great weekend. I'll be doing the Baseball Day in Canada stream on Saturday. Check out the Edmonton Prospects website if you'd like to check that out. We'll start things off at noon Mountain Time. Have a great week in hockey, everybody. Take care.
UFHL Now is produced by DM Productions. To get in touch, head to www.podcastalley.ca.